Many of us look forward to the holiday season with family dinners, shopping and gift opening, church services, etc., etc. The list goes on and on because the holidays are so busy, let's face it. But for others, it can be one of the loneliest and most depressing times of the year. Well, we want to discuss how to respond to this with today's guest, Rod Dorn. He has a Master of Social Work degree and is the owner of Birch Bay Counseling Services in Medicine Hat, and we welcome him to the show today. Rod, thanks so much for being with us today. So great to have you on.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And, when I was asked to do this, it was quite an honor, but also kind of scary because Christmas is such a big part of the year for so many Canadians. And I kind of wanted to reduce it down to a manageable size. So when I think of the perceptions and understandings of Christmas, I think there's some themes. And some of these themes are one is privilege, what we have, sharing together, connection, support, what builds us up. So some of us have that, but there's these other themes. Pain is another theme because it's kind of like that reminder of what we've lost or what we don't have, what we see others having, and we may have isolation, loneliness, disconnection.
Yeah, absolutely.
To use alliteration, sorry, a little bit further, it just these P words came up. Production. It's this pressure of picture perfect Christmas and keeping up with the status quo, and that can be really anxiety provoking. And there can be a lot of financial pressures and things. And then lastly, pause. We pause at this time of year because it's like um, you know, finally the culmination of everything that's happened this year. We stop, and it's year end, and it's Christmas, and we may not be completely prepared for this overwhelming moment of kind of trying to soak in all the changes and things.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think you're answering my first question, which is why is it so many people get depressed during the holiday season? I mean, you're kind of explaining it there. So there's so many fun activities happening, isn't there? So maybe perhaps some people feel like, seeing others having so much fun, maybe they themselves are feeling left out somehow if they don't have family around or friends, just that loneliness.
Yes, definitely. I do agree with that. I think, these themes that I've mentioned, privilege, pain, production, pause, these can contribute in a really kind of unhealthy way. And that may lead to anxiety, depression. It may trigger common psychological struggles such as grief. Um, and I kind of practice through this trauma informed lens. And the trauma lens really speaks to what is the importance of understanding meaning, the attachment and the connection that we have within our communities, within our families, within how we interact in our place, I guess, in the world. And so these deep inner triggers that Christmas time that are so, in our face, I think, you know, this can maybe trigger up abandonment, abuse. I'm not good enough. I don't belong. Something's wrong with me. I don't fit. And yeah, I think that can really be hard for so many people.
It's true. How much do you think social media might play into this? Like we often see, others sharing pictures of gifts, friends and family gatherings, and maybe we tend to compare and maybe we just feel that we don't measure up and maybe feeling some self-pity there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social media, pop culture, this really does reinforce this belief that Christmas is a time of happiness, abundance, laughter, joy. We see all these Hallmark movies, and they're in these, everything just is so perfect. But it portrays, it sort of forces us to think, well, or believe this is what is normal, and what is normal is to have this privilege. So it almost separates the ones of us who are the haves, and yet neglects, and sometimes even in a hidden way may ostracize the have-nots. Sometimes we don't recognize our privilege, and that's maybe because we didn't experience the loss or the isolation that so many have. This critical theory of oppression really is what it is, and it's highlighted by Bob Mullally. He's a researcher, but this pulls upon this sort of disadvantages underpinning and shoring up the silent forms of oppression portrayed by the privileged and felt by the less fortunate by accident usually. So I think if we recognize all that we have and are grateful for, though, we're able to move towards sort of understanding more of the compassion that's needed, and sharing and just providing support that's needed for others who are unfortunately really struggling at this time of year.
That's maybe a good way that a person should respond if they find themselves in that comparison trap and maybe feeling sorry for themselves. And, we also perhaps have unrealistic expectations sometimes during the holiday season. Like you mentioned, the Hallmark movies there. Maybe we need to be okay with just an average Christmas or New Year's Day. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really convoluted and tricky time of year. I think Christmas is actually more psychological than we really give it credit for. We are in our heads a lot, I think. Um, but I think, many are misguided. What is the true meaning? And I think we need to pause and actually pace things out a little bit and ask, what is Christmas? And I mean, I don't mean to open up Pandora's box here, but however, if you look from a Christian paradigm, Christmas does have this meaning and a reality that nobody can have more or less than another. Actually, it's to say the gift of Christ the Savior. We are all living in God's grace, and we have this gift of eternal fellowship. So I think that's a message of hope, and it really brings everything back down to equality and equity. And I think, for those of us who ascribe to that, we can be thankful and content about that, even with, in the face of financial pressures and a lot of the cost of living squeeze that we're living with. But I mean, even if somebody isn't following that perspective, I think there are some major themes that we can still reconcile with more of a contemporary Christmas view. A time of compassion and connection with the world where we live. We've all been on that receiving end of compassion, probably, and we consider maybe sharing that around as much as possible so that we can bless those who are poor in spirit and reminded of they can be reminded of love and connection, and they can partake, I guess. I think this is sort of like a really sort of pulling on the idea of a therapeutic community, but I think these are things we can all do. And so, yeah, connection and belonging is really a healing attachment. And that's a lot of what we do, even in a therapeutic session for somebody individually.
Wow. Now, you being a counselor yourself, how serious is this holiday depression? Is it usually a temporary thing, or can it turn into something that's more permanent if it isn't handled properly?
Yeah, in my best understanding of mental health problems and these issues, I mean, it's very complicated. There's depression and anxiety and stress disorders and psychosis disorders and substance use disorders, and there's just so many different ways of I guess challenges that we have to sort of come to understand and treat. So, I mean, these things may be circumstantial. They may be biological in their formation sometimes, and they may be a little bit of both. So I think that it's this perspective that psychiatry and psychology have to come together. And we're looking at possibly a pattern of depressive, anxious, or stressful, angry thoughts triggering a nervous system. And that change may happen actually at a biological level and may account for some genetic variations later down the road. That may not be possible to reverse. So I guess there's circumstantially these things may pop up, but they may last to more pervasive things. And so I think prevention is a huge piece of mental health that as a community, as a society, as a as a discipline, we need to do more about prevention. The message that I really want to portray here is to encourage people to really be considerate and intentional about how their attitudes, their thoughts, their behaviors, how all of these things impact their mental well-being, which is their physical well-being. It is interconnected, and we shouldn't think of mental health as somewhere out there. The body and the mind are connected. We don't want to deplete it. We don't want to harm it. We want this connection to be holistic and nourished. And so that's how I practice. And a lot of us practice from this sort of biopsychosocial spiritual lens. It appears to me that science and natural revelation do kind of come together and show that these are interconnected.
Now, Rod, what advice do you have for if friends or family who maybe see a loved one who is going through this depression? How should we respond?
Well, I think that, if we practice compassion, we can really help that person out. So we have to recognize, um, people are hurting for whatever reasons. And, if we offer care and support, if we share the abundance that we have with them, this is the season of giving, right? And so I think that's a big piece, and connection, like for somebody to feel like that belonging. Um, the best things in life are not things. These are relationships. I think that, that goes a long ways in helping somebody participate and feel important, and, refocus their mind on some of the things that they still have versus, some of these temptations to think about the things they've lost. Courage, it can be very challenging, very difficult, and very scary to sort of go through a time of suffering. So just to honor that it's very courageous for somebody to approach their mental health problems, to move towards that pain and work through that pain wherever it's coming from inside.
Yeah, yeah.
And then another one is creativity, trying new things, new perspectives. You can find a new way, change the way you see things, and the way that you see things will change.
Oh, interesting. I like that. I like that. I know, like, and of course, another C word is COVID. COVID has added so many challenges to what's going on. I know here in Southern Alberta, we still have restrictions when it comes to family gatherings and visiting elderly relatives in care homes. So, this also must have a significant impact on loneliness for many individuals. How should we deal with this?
Yeah, technology is that thing that, it's the blessing and the curse. It pulls us away from each other, but in some ways it pulls us closer together. And so I want to really pull on the strengths of what technology can do for us. With the advancement of Zoom, here we are. Like we're a few hundred kilometers away, and yet we're able to have this face-to-face chat, which is wonderful. I think we can use that. We can use that as a source of connection. If we can't physically be somewhere, if it's not allowed, if there's a restriction, we can text, we can video chat, we can write letters even, like bring back the old pen pal thing, if that's what sort of our folks in the care centers and things, if that's
Yeah.
what they have access to and that's what they're comfortable with, that could be a lot of fun, and that could mean the world for people.
Yeah. Really quick to, how would a person know that things have reached a point when they should go and get some professional help? And also, I think that some people might be scared to seek that counseling. So, what would you say to those who might be hesitant to go get help?
Yeah, like I think awareness is so key in terms of finding out sort of what is the problem, and oftentimes the way I refer to it as is this is like the check engine light comes on somewhere. We know there's a problem. We may not know exactly what it is, but when the check engine light comes on, it's like symptoms. I don't have as much energy. I'm sleeping. I'm oversleeping, or I can't sleep. Oftentimes, our appetite, or we're having headaches and these other somatic symptoms. Um, Maybe we're using substances to cope, and we're getting angry and irritable. People are noticing around us that we're not the same as we were before. These are all sort of like that check engine light to say, hey, like maybe it's time to sort of check in and see if there's something that, is really bothering you inside, something that might be, you know, contributing to some of these sort of nervous system bo- uh, concerns that end up sort of getting worse, sort of, if not addressed. And there's no shame in addressing, when you have a mental health problem, because it's really a physical health problem just as much as a mental health problem. And there's no shame in any in going to like try to seek help for anything, whether it be, quitting smoking or going to the gym or changing your eating habits. I mean, we all have these sort of common things where we're all just a work in progress.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said there, Rod. Thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your insights and your wisdom and your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really thought this was a good time, and yeah, we'll see you around.
Rod Dorn is with Birch Bay Counseling Services in Medicine Hat.